It's not often that I do this, but the perfect linebacker just entered the transfer portal, and we'll talk about him next. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, and I'm likely the only person that you're going to hear from today that has had an office in the Manning Center at Ole Miss and worked in the national media for Yahoo Sports. Thank you for joining us. Today on the show, the perfect linebacker for a Pete Golding defense might be in the portal. Will Ole Miss get him on campus? Will Ole Miss be interested? I hope so. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and YouTube. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. That will come in handy with a Peach Bowl that is likely going to be sold out. If you want to look at it online, it's gametime.co, but download the app, create an account, and you get $20 off. That isn't bad with promo code Locked On College. All right, the transfer portal opened up yesterday, and yes, it was as crazy as we all thought it would be. But one of the benefits of that going in there, everybody's paying attention to the Walter Nolans and the Kyle McCords and the Dylan Gabriels and all these big names that are going in the portal. We talked about last week, Ole Miss going into this portal season not needing to play the splash positions, that Ole Miss has an opportunity to use the portal to actually build what they need. And lo and behold, what I think is the perfect linebacker for a Pete Golding system has gotten into the portal. His name is Chris Paul. He is a linebacker that was at Arkansas last year. He was a 2023 Butkus Watch list player. He was 2022 second-team freshman All-American by College Football News and The Athletic, and he was freshman All-SEC in 2022. He is a really good football player, just period. And I think everybody needs to know he had 75 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks in a year against Arkansas where he was learning a new scheme. He was the second leading tackler on the Arkansas Razorbacks team as well. He's a little over 6 foot. He is about 235 pounds. He is from Crisp County, Georgia. 6'1", 233 from Crisp County, Georgia. For those who might think that rings a bell a little bit, that is where A.J. Brown is from. To me, he is a plus Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste. He is the perfect player to put next to Centarian Perkins and play the linebacker position the way that we want it to be played. Like Perkins needs to add a little bit of weight. Ole Miss needs a player or two that will fit in. But to me, Chris Paul is a plus Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste. And we all know how important Jean-Baptiste was for Ole Miss's defense. He is going to make explosive plays. He is going to play behind that defensive line that has a chance to be pretty good. All in all, I think Ole Miss needs to make Chris Paul a priority. At this point, I don't know anything about visits. I'm just hopeful that Ole Miss will reach out to him. But Chris Paul has a chance to be a big-time player in that Pete Golding system, and I like to think that he knows that as well. I like to think that he can look at it and say, hey, I'm going to look a lot like Henry To'oTo'o did at Alabama. The defensive line, I can make that kind of an impact like he did when he got in the Pete Golding system, sorry about that, at Alabama. I think it's going to be very important. Chris Paul has a chance to be a very, very special player at Ole Miss. And if you look at what he's done, he's been in the system. This is him hitting Jackson Dart in Fayetteville just a year ago. Big time player, big explosive player, 230 pounds. So he has the beef to play that linebacker position, but also has the athleticism to go sideline to sideline. So you're not just either big or small, which it sometimes this year Ole Miss was. This is the perfect Pete Golding linebacker, period. You can't get around it. This is a position that Ole Miss can make a noise with, and I think that Ole Miss is going to try and get him on campus. I think we're going to hear something in the near future about Chris Paul. That's what I think is going to happen because the fit is just too good. The fit is too much the way we want it to be. And he has that relationship with A.J. Brown. He has that relationship, honestly, with Pete Golding, who recruited him out of high school, out of Chris County. And I think it's just a perfect fit. Sometimes in this transfer portal, perfect fits just appear. They show themselves. And this is one of those occasions. This is a player that I'm leading with today because, honestly, I just think that this is going to go farther than some people might think it will be. And I think this is an important type situation. We'll see exactly what happens, but he is the first of many players to get into the portal today. We talked about Kyle McCord. We talked about Dylan Gabriel, but there's also some other players that went into the transfer portal as well that Ole Miss needs to keep an eye on. And recruiting and landing a player like Chris Paul will, A, make the defense instantly better. You automatically get better against the run than you were. You want to talk about what happened last year at Georgia. Everybody talks about that. That's the sour taste game. You want to prevent that from happening again, you get bigger at linebacker. You get better at linebacker. If that happens, the defense, they can contain the run against even elite talented teams. And you need a player like Chris Paul to do that. I am very, very bullish on this athlete. And I think he can help out Ole Miss in numerous ways. So I think everybody should keep an eye on Chris Paul from Arkansas. There's other linebackers, other G5 players that have gotten to the system. This is not to denigrate them. The players that Ole Miss has already had on campus to visit. There's other linebackers that are in the system. This is not to denigrate them at all. I just really, really like this Chris Paul player at linebacker and specifically in Ole Miss's defensive Pete Golding system. When you put those together, it's just a marriage made in heaven. And I think that Ole Miss would be better off, honestly, for going after this kid. We'll see exactly what happens, but that's my thought of what's going on. And I think Ole Miss absolutely should pursue this kid and do, honestly, what it takes to get him. He's that good of a football player, and we'll see exactly how it goes as well. Really interesting stuff. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. The transfer portal is getting wacky, and we look at a few of the big names that I think that Ole Miss will at least try to get. I think that Chris Paul, who we talked about in the first segment, is a player that Ole Miss should go after. These are some players that I think Ole Miss could go after. Anyway, you shouldn't have to worry about when you're buying tickets to the Peach Bowl, getting the tickets. It should be stress-free. Ole Miss versus Penn State is sure to be a big event and is likely also going to be a sellout. So why spend time at the mercy of the school where you get your tickets wherever they put you? You get to pick your own seat. So at Game Time, they're here to help you out with this great offer. The Game Time app has views from every seat in the venue. If you want to see exactly what you're going to walk into, they have that. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. And with zone deals, you can just pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Like I said, this Peach Bowl, it would work out pretty well for. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your order. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Locked On has created the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts and Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, we talked about a player in the first segment in Chris Paul that I think that Ole Miss absolutely should go after, and they should double barrel go after this player. They should be serious about this deal, and we'll pay attention in the meantime if Ole Miss can get him on campus. So I have that. Now, what about some other players that have gotten into the portal? And there's three players that I want to talk about over the next couple of segments that Ole Miss at least has a pull to bring them to campus. The first player I want to mention is Kyle Kennard. He is a rush in from Georgia Tech. We all remember he played in Oxford, and with the Georgia Tech players that Ole Miss has on campus, anytime a Georgia Tech, and especially a Georgia Tech defensive lineman, goes into the transfer portal, my ears perk up. Kyle Kennard is a good player. He was a pass rushing specialist. He can provide a little bit of what you want at that jack position, that place that Cedric Johnson kind of played this year, but it wasn't so specialized. That is going to be a good key position for Ole Miss. So this player being a good rush in, a talented guy that put up decent numbers this season. I think he had somewhere in the neighborhood of 5.5 sacks. I think Ole Miss fans should keep an eye on this player and follow his recruitment. After Jared Ivey, after Akello Stone, those are two defensive linemen that came from Georgia Tech. They all know each other. They probably all talk. They're probably all friends. This is probably a name that you need to keep an eye on. And also Zamari Walton. Like I said, anytime a Georgia Tech name pops up, I pay attention. And he is somebody that Ole Miss fans should probably keep an eye on. I have no information that anything has happened on this situation, but it's just kind of a 1 + 1 = 2 type situation, as Michael Borky on the Rebel Report is prone to say. Good player, Kyle Kennard. We'll see if Ole Miss turns up the heat on this ball player. Another player that I want to bring up is this one, Will Sheppard, the wide receiver at Vanderbilt. And Will Sheppard is in a unique position, and I don't know how involved Ole Miss is going to be in this recruitment, but if you look at it, Will Sheppard could have a Tre Harris type impact on whichever team he goes to. I think Ole Miss is going to be a little bit interested in what's going on, but here's the catch, okay? I have it on good authority that Tre Harris is 70-30, that percentage about coming back to Ole Miss. And if he comes back to Ole Miss, maybe Ole Miss isn't playing in the transfer portal like they normally would. Tre Harris is probably as good as most players that you can get out of the portal. So why would you go to the portal if Tre Harris is going to come back? And especially with the knowledge that Deion Smith could be on the other side, and you have Aiden Williams, and you have a wide receiver room that is coming along pretty good. We still have the question about Jordan Watkins as well. So we'll see with the players coming back. I think that if you ask me to put money on it right now, I would bet that Tre Harris is coming back to Ole Miss next year. Through draft grades, through the fact that he just loves it here, through the fact that he's a stud receiver and has a chance to do really, really special things and potentially be a first-round draft pick, I would put that in Tre Harris returning next year with Jackson Dart, with Quinshawn, all of those offensive weapons. Those big three offensive weapons are likely going to return if you had to ask me. So when I bring that up, and I bring that up to bring this up, Will Sheppard, where would he sit? Would Will Sheppard come in and be that slot, the slot receiver if Jordan Watkins goes pro? Would Will Sheppard fit in on the other side where Dayton Wade played a good bit this season? The question becomes, it's an interesting situation, but the question becomes, which and what wide receiver could play well, because you have a chance. Ole Miss, as we know, does not substitute very often. Substitutions are not really a thing in a Lane Kiffin offense. It just doesn't happen. It's not a depth thing. It's not anything like that. They just don't play a lot of players. They just don't. There's probably 35 players offensively that seeds the field in any considerable amount other than mop-up time. So where does Will Sheppard fit if he can't get on the field at Ole Miss? If Deion Smith is coming to Oxford and they have him earmarked. Now, we know that Deion Smith visited officially this past weekend, and he's going to visit officially Mississippi State next weekend. It's going to be an Ole Miss State battle. And honestly, it's a battle that Ole Miss should win, but it's going to be an Ole Miss State battle. And the way you look at things realistically, State needs a quarterback. What little NIL money they have, they're going to have to invest in a quarterback. I think they're going to legitimately try for Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel could end up at SC, could end up at Oregon, but I think Mississippi State is going to legitimately try for somebody that for a year, a rental will cost north of $1 million. That's going to blow up the high-profile players that Mississippi State could get this year. But that's also important for Mississippi State because they need a proof of concept in the offense. They need a good quarterback. They don't need to sputter in year one after what they put up in 2023. So I do think Dillon Gabriel or even KJ Jefferson or somebody like that is worth the investment, but I think they're going to do it at the expense of the top-level receivers that are also available in this class. So Deion Smith, I think, is an advantage that he goes to Ole Miss. Ole Miss got a decommitment from Jeremy Scott. They got a decommitment from San Francisco McGee. That's kind of the territory that I think that Mississippi State will be walking in this recruitment class. And, you know, Jeff Lebby's a good football coach. They're going to recruit a lot of the same type players that Ole Miss recruits because the offensive similarities and things like that. That doesn't mean that Mississippi State's going to win. They're going to win some, but just to know that you're going to hear their name a little bit more, and that's probably going to make the Mississippi State fans a little bit more excited. But if you look at this transfer portal, if big-name players that have gotten in, you got Kyle Kennard. I think he would absolutely fit. Chris Paul is a player that I think that Ole Miss should recruit. And we'll see exactly what happens. That's just a slam dunk home run fit in a Pete Golding defense. It isn't a Monty Montgomery situation. It's a Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste situation, except probably more of a plus player. That is the way I describe Chris Paul right now. And you have Kyle Kennard potentially as a rush in. We don't know about Cedric Johnson. We don't know about Jared Ivey. You might need to keep with them. You might need to bring in another rush in to kind of fill a role as well. And we're going to talk in the next segment about the big fish and the 400-pound gorilla that is in the room right now. Still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A big, big fish went into the portal yesterday that every single school in the nation is going to pursue, including Ole Miss, and we'll talk about it next. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. You know, when you hire the right person for your job, they can have just a benefit that almost it can't be measured. And if you hire the wrong one, you're going to be doing it again in 3 years. It's kind of like hiring a football coach. If you hire the right guy, you're going to be in the conversation for the playoff. If you hire the wrong one, you're going to be doing it again in 3 years. If you hire the wrong one in real life, you're going to be doing it again in 3 weeks. LinkedIn just isn't another job board. It has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 80% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that the small businesses are wearing so many hats, they just don't have time to do this hiring process over and over and over again. So thankfully, the LinkedIn hiring process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They've even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions that make it even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts and Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. Be part of history. Now, there was a big fish that entered the portal yesterday, and that is Walter Nolan, the defensive lineman from Texas A&M, former, I think, #1 player in the country. This is a guy that got after the quarterbacks and made that Texas A&M defensive line a menace over the course of the year, and he is entering the transfer portal. And everybody's like, okay, Steve, why are you bringing this up? Do we have a chance? Well, I think we have a puncher's chance. I think we have a real chance to at least be in it. It might be a situation where Ole Miss gets outbid because literally everybody is going to be bidding on this player, including Texas A&M, that he just entered the portal away from. This is a situation that's going to be a big deal. And this is why I bring this up. I was listening to, David Johnson. And David Johnson's pretty tuned in on Mississippi high school recruiting. And he talked about something that I knew about, but I forgot about. And that is Walter Nolan is originally from Olive Branch, Mississippi. That's about 50 miles up the road from Oxford, Mississippi. Yes, he went to high school in West Tennessee his last year. Tennessee got him out to that high school. They thought that they were going to get him. They ended up losing him in the end. He probably has a really good relationship with the University of Tennessee. They are a well-funded collective. They are a well-positioned NIL market. That is a program to watch. That's the reason I describe this as a puncher's chance. Literally every school in the country is going to be recruiting Walter Nolan. And Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle, he's probably 6'5", 300 pounds. He makes plays on the football field. Now, as soon as he went into the portal, you started getting retweets from Lane Kiffin and Kelvin Bolden and Walker Jones. They all started to say this was the big fish that went into the portal. And this is the reason that I think they did that. When you have a situation like what happened at Georgia a year ago, you realize that you genuinely need to do what you can to get better against the run in the Southeastern Conference to play these elite teams. That is absolutely the case. And I talked about in the first segment why Ole Miss needed to go after Chris Paul just for that reason. This is another one that if Ole Miss can get, and you can put him besides J.J. Pegues, you're looking at potentially one of the better front sevens in the SEC. Literally top 2 or 3 or 4. You're going to be an animal against the run. It is going to be very difficult for anybody to line up and to take advantage of you. Ole Miss only gave up a little bit north, I think, of 100 yards a game to begin with. They kept people under 300 yards for the game in like 6 of their 12 contests. I think Mississippi State went up over like 304, but we can still talk about that in this context. So Walter Nolan coming into the league would make the defensive line better. We talked about J.J. Pegues returning last week and how Ole Miss wasn't going to have an opportunity necessarily to improve themselves in the portal. I was wrong. Walter Nolan coming in would improve that defensive line. And you could have a situation, honestly, like I said, I know nothing about Cedric Johnson coming back. I know nothing about Jared Ivey. But just from this show today, you're looking at having a front seven potentially of either Cedric Johnson or Jared Ivey. Kyle Kennard at rush end, and then you have J.J. Pegues and Walter Nolan, and that is a top-shelf defensive line. And when you look at the defensive linemen that are being brought in, all of a sudden, Cam Beavers, Camarion Franklin, Jeffrey Rush, William Eccles, playing on that defensive line in a second-team capacity with those starters, you've got a pretty salty unit that has been developed. And then you need to build the linebacker room. You have Centarion Perkins playing linebacker. He needs to put on a little weight. He will put on a little weight. As soon as the football season ends, they're going to get him in with a nutritionist. They're going to get him in the weight room. Centarion Perkins is going to be a different looking player in year 2 than year 1, period. They're going to figure out a way to keep his athleticism. They're going to set him up to be the athletic linebacker playing at Ole Miss. Who is the thumper that you're going to put in? Who is the 6'1", 235-pound linebacker that can mix it up with the way that Ole Miss plays defense? That's Chris Paul. Ole Miss absolutely should recruit Chris Paul. And if that happens, Ole Miss has a chance for a front seven that has gotten demonstrably be better in year 2 under Pete Golding. To where all of a sudden it's like, okay, we have some G5 players coming in that are good football players from lower schools, visiting the school, trying to see if they want to come play college football here. If you get them on top of these elite players, you've just built front seven depth at a level that Ole Miss has not had in decades. You've just built that depth. And all of a sudden, you're going into the last 30 days of the transfer portal, and you're trying to find safeties and you're trying to find cornerbacks. You have Chris Graves coming back. You have TJ Dudley at linebacker coming back as well. This linebacker room with Chris Paul, all of a sudden, it's kind of ready-made. It's kind of fit to go. And you'll see this Ole Miss team really perform well against the run in 2024, in my opinion, as well. Should be a lot of fun, and I'm really interested to see exactly how they go. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Every dayers, we got that recruiting mindset with the portal and high school recruiting going on right now. We also have Peach Bowl news and Chris Beard's run we're going to talk about during the week. So tune in for that. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports today, and they've launched their first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories in sports of the day with local experts like me and Locked On, plus the national shows covering every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Hotty toddy.